it's all going to come down to that. Is it the second last race on the Friday? It is, isn't it? Yeah, it's going to come down to that one. Bragging rights. Hello and welcome along to the Let's Talk Racing YouTube channel for our Cheltenham mid-season special. We do apologise for the delay on the video. It was meant to come on Monday, but instead, due to a mix-up in timings, we've had to move it to Thursday. We're not going to discuss the international meeting or the Doncaster. It's good racing at Doncaster as well this weekend, and we're going to solely focus on what we've learnt so far this season. And we're calling it the mid-season preview because we've done 5 episodes so far. This will be the 6th, and I think altogether, I've worked it out, I think we'll do 11. And then obviously around February time, it's full focus into the Cheltenham Festival. So although it might not be mid-season, it's our mid-season, so you're going to have to forgive us for that. But it's basically going to be going through each division, what we've learnt so far, what we thought of the run. Some have been disappointing, some have been very impressive, and our minds have changed. And then we're going to look at where they could be going on the road to the Cheltenham Festival. There's plenty to talk about. Let's crack on straight away into the Supreme Novices Hurdle division, the 2-mile hurdling division. And at the top of the market is John Bon, 1 from 1 this season, unbeaten. He cost £570,000, and he's a full brother to Duvan. The Kennel Gate is next to Ascot. You were very impressed with him. Is your mind firmly that he's maybe better than Constitution Hill, who we'll get onto later?
Yeah, he's probably got a bit more speed, I'd have thought, than John Bon. I know some people have differing views on that. The two of them have been really impressive so far. John Bon obviously beating Good Risk at All, that wasn't a bad marker, and Constitution Hill beating White Eye, that wasn't a bad marker. John Bon just looked to have plenty of natural pace. It'll be interesting to see how he goes in the Kennel Gate, which will be a step up in class, obviously maybe taking on an Appers Hill or a horse of that sort of constitution. So that will test his mettle, but I know the two of them are very short in the Supreme market. They're probably not backable prices, but probably based off what they've done, Josh, they deserve to be first and second favourites.
Yeah, I agree. Going into the season, I think we both thought that Sir Gerhard and Kilcruit would largely dominate these markets at this stage of the season anyway. You'd expect Kilcruit to come out and win his maiden hurdle. That wasn't the case. He was beaten by Largy Debut at the weekend. Was there an alarm ring in your head when you were watching that? And where do you think they'll go from there? Do you think they'll go up in trip, or do you think you can draw a line through that and just see what they're going to do next?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I'd say they'll probably roll the dice again at 2 miles. He didn't look short of speed in his bumper wins. Obviously, he won at the Dublin Racing Festival so well, and then he won at Punchestown, which is usually a speed favouring track. So I don't think he's short of pace. He just didn't jump with any degree of fluency against Largy Debut, which would be a disappointment, and something that if you'd taken maybe a short price about him for the Supreme was something that would have really disappointed you. He's now out to as big as I think 10 or 12 to 1 in a few places for that race. That might be an overreaction. Some of these Mullins horses have actually gone out almost exponentially in price. Having ran once, they're entitled to come on for that. I assume we'll now see Kilcruit maybe running one of the maiden hurdles at Christmas time at Leopardstown. Maybe the one on Stephen's Day, the Classical Dream one, the first race on the card there. And if he was to go and win that, he's suddenly halved in price again for the Supreme.
With regards to Sir Gerhard, Willie's come out at the start of the season and said that he is more of the Ballymore type. Do you think if Kilcruit was to disappoint or maybe not look as good over 2 miles again, they would consider maybe turning that and Sir Gerhard comes to the Supreme? Or do you think they could stick with Dysart Dynamo, who was very impressive at the weekend?
Yeah, well, the two of them have options. I don't think Sir Gerhard's short of speed either, and Dysart Dynamo's been campaigned over 2 miles, a strong puller, but a good jumper, and it looks like a horse that has speed. He has stamina. He's got plenty of everything. Obviously, for my Ante-Post book, I want him up in trip and Kilcruit and Sir Gerhard to dominate at 2 miles. But we'll only see that kind of next time out. Maybe we'll see a Dysart Dynamo in a graded race over 2 miles next time out, and that will probably tell us where he'll end up going. As for Sir Gerhard, again, you'd assume he'll start in a maiden hurdle over 2 miles, and we'll see from there. But you'd certainly, if you were in the Mullins camp, you'd hope he'd do a bit better than Kilcruit did on the weekend.
These are the horses that coming into the season we're excited about. One horse who I didn't know about, you didn't know about, not many people behind this camera would have known about, was Constitution Hill, who made his hurdling debut for Nicky Henderson at the weekend. And there's certain horses that fly around WhatsApp groups the Friday before racing on a Saturday going, this could be an aeroplane. He was one of those, and I looked at the race and I thought he's 2 to 1. Mai Tai is a good horse. He's going to have to be seriously good to beat him on his first start. Nico de Boinville was there travelling like a dream. jumped the last alongside, and off he went, and he flew, and he beat him by 10 plus lengths, and he's now understandably 9-2. And I think on what Constitution Hill's actually done, I would potentially put him higher up than John Bon. I think he's achieved more, and John Bon maybe might be 5-2 favourite because of the connection to Douvan, and maybe he's got slightly more hype around him coming into the season, but the Constitution Hill was very, very good. I do think they'll both stick at 2 miles. Nicky Henderson isn't shy at running 2 good 2-milers in the Supreme, the likes of Bouvidaire and Altior. Bouvidaire finished 3rd to Altior in that Supreme. I do want to mention a couple of horses that have ran behind some of these good ones, and I think could go close in something like the Betfair Hurdle. The two to mention are Good Risk at All, who finished 2nd to John Bon. He's now been given a rating of 125, although his jumping isn't very good. He does need to scrub up on that. 125 is definitely lenient for him, and it wouldn't surprise me if we saw him win maybe a good handicap and then go into the Betfair Hurdle as well. And then Nappers Hill as well, who's, believe it or not, unbeaten, an entry bumper winner. He's 2 from 2 this year. He's not been fantastic. We both agreed with that. And the Kennel Gate is next. It looks like he's going to go up against John Bon, but he's rated 130. That could again be lenient, and they could be looking at something like the Betfair Hurdle, because I know Paul Nicholls is keen on the horse. He's not done it visually for me. Out of those two, I reckon Nappers Hill could run in a Betfair Hurdle but skip Cheltenham altogether and go to Aintree. He seems that type of horse, and Paul Nicholls has favoured doing that. But then looking at the 2.5 mile novice hurdle division, and there's plenty in there as well. John Bon, Sir Gerhard, Constitution Hill, Dysart, Dynamo, but there's also a few other horses that we've not seen yet, or we've seen very little of, the likes of Classic Getaway, Journey with Me, Hollow Games, O'Toole. Out of those, which one do you think you'd have more of an eye on for this race, and what do you think of some of those anyway? Yeah,
they're interesting horses. I'm waiting for O'Toole to come out for the Crawfords. Seems to be a long wait. Haven't seen him in the entries for anything as well, which is a little bit disconcerting, so hopefully all's okay with him. He had good champion bumper form from Punchestown. Hollow Games has set a decent enough standard of form over 2.5 miles without blowing me away. He looks like he probably needs a little bit further than 2.5 at this stage, but connections keep saying that he's got plenty of speed, so he's probably the benchmark of those horses that you've just mentioned there, as there are a few that have won in bumpers or ran well in bumpers, but we haven't quite seen them yet. And probably it's only going to be after we see those gluttony of horses come out in the Leopardstown, Limerick maiden hurdles in Ireland over Christmas, and maybe the Naas maiden hurdle on Lawlor's and Ace Day, that we'll see plenty more of those horses and be able to form a better picture in the Ballymore, because at the moment I think it's a race that's kind of hasn't taken any type of shape yet. Yeah, I agree. It's very difficult to split those horses that are at the head of the Supreme market, and maybe would they send John Bon up in trip? It's highly unlikely. Would Kill Crook go up in trip? So Gerhard is plenty of unknowns at the moment. But like you say, Hollow Games, I originally thought he'd be an Albert Bartlett horse, but it looks like the Lawlors of Naas is going to come up next, and Gordon's traditionally campaigned his Ballymore horse towards that race, and they might just be thinking that, and they might be thinking maybe the longevity of his career. The Bartlett is obviously a very, very brutal race, and it's very difficult at this stage to know who's going to run in the race. O'Toole, one of your favourites, obviously he split Sir Gerhard and Kilcruit at Punchestown, but Stuart Crawford has said the other day that he'll be out in a low-key maiden hurdle sometime soon, and he's got longer trips in mind for the spring, so that could be a positive there. Let's look at the Bartlett. It's a very difficult race to assess now. I think a few runners that we probably could say will target this would be Blazing Carl, who's entered in the Bartlett trial at Cheltenham on Saturday. He's beaten Gringo Dobrel and Gelino Bello on his 2 starts this season. And then Bardenstown Lad, the horse that you like as well. Yeah, no, I put him up at 50s, Josh. He was one of the best pokes I've ever seen. So a value hunter here, but he is the slowest horse I've ever seen. Do you think realistically he could go very close if he was to turn up in a Bartlett? I think he might do, just because you look at the Bartlett market right at the moment, and it's just littered with non-runners and horses that maybe, you know, there's horses in there that are going to be much better than Bardenstown Lad. A horse like Ginto is going to end up being potentially a Gold Cup horse. Bardenstown Lad probably won't be. But at the same stage, you know, at their kind of respective points in their career, is somebody like a Bardenstown Lad just going to be tougher, going to be grittier. You know, you remember the Martello Towers, the Very Woods. They weren't the best horse in that race long term, but they still won the race. I liked Blazing Cal. I put him up on my channel there a couple of weeks ago for the Bartlett. I just like that form line from Galway. I like what he did at Cheltenham, and I know, I see Gavin Lynch obviously put him up the other day, and his price has crashed a little bit, but he's a nice horse, and you'd have to assume this is where he'll go, and he gallops all day, and probably the dimensions of the Bartlett with only 2 hurdles in the final 7 furlongs will help as well, because he does tend to plough into them.
I think it's worth mentioning Ginto then, because he was €470,000 purchase. He's 2 from 2 this season, and he was kind of spoken about in the same breath as Hollow Games. He's a massive, enormous horse, and you can imagine that he's going to be a real force over a fence next year. He could also run in the Lawlers of Naas novice hurdle. What did you make of his run at the weekend?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. I know we discussed it at a bit more length on the audio podcast there yesterday afternoon, but I thought he was really impressive. He was a horse that probably hadn't done it for me up until the weekend, but he jumps super, he hits the line so hard. As I say, it's just a thing with that Albert Bartlett. Gordon kind of almost, I wouldn't say he ruined, but horses like Death Duty and No More Heroes had really, really tough races in the Bartlett, and I think it ever so slightly has scarred Gordon's idea of that race. Even Commander of Fleet, who was a winner at the weekend, he was second in a Bartlett. It's taken him almost 2 years to get back to any type of form. So that's something that might bear in mind, especially if they think this Ginto could be a serious horse.
The next race that we're going to talk about is the Triumph Hurdle and the Juveniles, and at the head of the market, and a long way at the head of the market, is Fildor, who we've seen twice. He won at Fairyhouse in the Grade 3 there, and it looks like Chepstow is going to be next. A lot of people like him, but I do fear that the likes of Willie Mullins, the Nicky Hendersons, maybe haven't sent out their best juveniles yet. I think it's very fair to say, with the case of Willie Mullins. Do you think it's recency bias and they're just seeing Fildor being so dominant at the moment, and maybe something could come out which is slightly better? Or do you think Fildor is just very, very good?
Well, I think there's a combination of both there, Josh. I think Fildor is very good. I think he's very much entitled to be where he is in the market. I think he'll probably go to either Leopardstown or Chepstow this winter and probably win. And that, will further enhance his claims. I'd agree with you. I doubt Willie Mullins has even kind of breathed on his best juveniles just yet, so it'll be interesting to see whether he has anything in the woodwork, or whether even Gordon has something himself in the woodwork as well to potentially run in the race. We obviously saw for the majority of last year he had both Quilixios and Zanahiyr being the 2 mainstays of that division, so that's something to bear in mind with Fildor. I saw that In This World, the horse that beat him, I saw you put up a tweet earlier saying that he's now heading to the Adonis. Now, I don't know about you, Josh, but that would scare the living daylights out of me if I was an In This World backer for the Triumph Hurdle, because those horses that win the Adonis have no chance at Cheltenham.
Yeah, I really like In This World, but I read that and I went, oh no, that's not ideal, because you've got to only look in the last couple of seasons. Tritonics ran in the Adonis, Solos ran in the Adonis, and they've looked very impressive. They've gone to the Triumph and been absolutely pumped. In This World was very impressive, and he actually beat Fildor over in France. Dan Skelton has said it's the Adonis, the Triumph and Aintree that's likely, and I think they're actually going to make a stallion out of him because he's still entire. That did put me off a little bit, and out of the horses that we've seen so far, it would be Fildor. He is at the top of the market for a reason. Porticello runs in the Grade 2 Summit Juvenile Hurdle. We've seen him once at Wetherby. I think he's a very good horse. I don't think he's on Fildor's level, but I do think he'll be a very exciting chaser down the line, and it'd be interesting to see if he can build on that performance. He won it fairly cosily in the end, and if he can build on that, he should be winning at the weekend. But I've been doing a bit of digging. Vauban, Vauban, trained by Willie Mullins in the Rich Ritchie Silks. The Rich Ritchie racing manager is very sweet on him, and so is Willie. Could be one of their better juveniles this season. I think he's currently 25-1, and I must admit, Benaud for Joseph O'Brien was probably slightly premature. They're both the same price currently. I think if I could switch that round and be on Vauban at the same price, I would be. Matterhorn as well for Paul Nicholls. I think he's 50-1 for the Triumph, and Paul Nicholls absolutely loves him. I would definitely say that Matterhorn could be his best juvenile. And then Got Glory as well, also in the Burning Victory Galopin de Champs Silks. He's also trained by Willie Mullins, and I think they've got the Triumph Hurdle in mind. Let's talk about another race which includes exciting youngsters, the Champion Bumper. American Mike definitely has put his stall out and sets the standard. The Big Doyen's been impressive. Pink in the Park was very impressive. Springwell Bay, although I don't think John Joe would send him to Cheltenham, I reckon they'd probably wait until Aintree for him. Willie Mullins keeps talking about this Facile Vega. Out of Quavega by Walk in the Park, he says that this horse would make your hairs stand up on the gallops. Clearly very, very exciting. American Mike, though, definitely sets a standard, and you suspect that he's going to kick on as well. How impressed were you with him?
Yeah, hard not to be very impressed, Josh, with the way he did it at Down Royal. He beat Noel Meade's Romeo Brown, who dead heated in that Ferry House bumper on Hatton's Grace Day, which usually has a pretty good roll of honour. So that form looks pretty robust at this stage, and he won head in chest. Now, who on earth's taking whatever he is, 7-2, 4-1 at this stage for the champion bumper? Probably needs to have their head examined. If you got on at fancier prices, more luck to you, because I suspect he'll win at Navan in a couple of weeks in that listed bumper, and he might contract even further in price. In terms of the rest, it's hard to know what they've all beaten, really. The big Doyen's done it really impressively 2 times for small connections, which is great. Connections that are rolling the dice, this money for jam syndicate, so fingers crossed they get a good horse out of it. I would take on that Pink in the Park all day, every day. I think that was an over-heightened sense of excitement about a good bumper horse at Listowel in September. It was English King syndrome all over again, that we all got up out of our seats. And obviously, hard to know again, even going back to this Sunday with Sander Clegane, even how much has he beaten? I don't know, but if he's beaten a few decent horses, he's done it pretty nicely. I see he's been installed at 16-1 for the race, and I suppose if it was as good as you thought it was, he might go down that route.
I definitely know that you're a fan, especially with the close connection to Paul Nolan and latest exhibition. Let's then talk about the Arkle Novices Chase, and we'll talk about the Novice Chasers in more detail as well. The Arkle picture is interesting. Appreciate it, who we've not seen yet. He obviously won the 2021 Supreme Novices Hurdle at Cheltenham. The ground has been against him, and then suddenly we've had a monsoon over the last couple of days. It looks like he's going to run at the Leopardstown Christmas Festival in the 2 mile 1 furlong beginners chase, which probably means that Ferny Hollow will represent the stable in the Grade 1 novice chase. Interesting. What do you think of Ferny Hollow at the weekend?
I thought he was pretty good. He got better as the round went on. He was novice-y early. He jumped well late on in the race, and he outbattled Course Sublime, which is a decent enough effort, even though that horse does tend to hang fire under pressure. You'd be happy enough with him first time out in a year. He's bound to improve first, and will probably learn more in a Grade 1 next time out. He's going to probably have to run against the likes of a Riviere d'Hotel, Cape Gentleman, some pretty decent yardsticks, and that'll be where we'll see him to best effect. Appreciate it. I don't mind it. People seem to be a little bit sketchy. He's only going to be out at Christmas time. Then he'll run in the Irish Arkle.
That'd definitely be the plan.
I suppose the only thing that could cause mayhem to that is off possibility that he rocks up on the 27th and he falls in the race, because then you have to find a beginners, then you're probably going to Cheltenham having just won a beginners chase, which wouldn't be ideal. But if he goes and wins on the 27th, Irish Arkle, then the Arkle, I don't see any issue.
Over here we've got Dysart, who's not been seen yet over a fence, but obviously has a lofty reputation. I put him up for the Arkle, we'll get onto that later. And then Edwardstone beat Third Time Lucky in the Henry VIII at the weekend. Third Time Lucky bubble burst, did everything right for the first half of the race, and then just capitulated in the second half. Probably did fairly well to finish where he did. He just looks so difficult to ride. I do not envy Harry Skelton in the slightest. And Edwardstone did look quite polished. He jumped well and won very impressively. You've also got Saint Roir, who I think is going chasing, and Blue Lord, who could be outside candidates, but it definitely looks firmly with the top two, I would say, at the moment, with Appreciate It and Ferny Hollow. And what would be interesting is we're looking at the Marsh now. Bob Ollinger is the sure price favourite, and I suspect he will run in the Marsh, but he's definitely got more chance of dropping down in trip than stepping up. My Drogo's in there as well. Appreciate It. Maybe if Ferny Hollow is very good over 2 miles, they might not see a reason for Appreciate It to stay down that route. What did you make of Bob Ollinger's chasing debut compared to My Drogo's up until the point that he fell?
I thought they were probably similar enough. I thought both of them would jump pretty well up until then. No fireworks, but it's their first time over fences each. So you're entitled to think that they'll scrub up on their jumping and improve for the round. Bob Ollinger's jumping up the straight would leave a little bit to be desired in my book. I'd like to see him maybe be a little bit more polished next time out, but I'm sure he will be. He's coming from the right house in that regard, with Henry's horses usually jumping so well as novice chasers. Same with the Skeltons, they usually jump so well, and I thought My Drogo jumped pretty well in the main. Took a novice fall at 2 out. That's a trappy fence for young horses, and hopefully there's piranhas of information going around that these two might run against each other at Cheltenham on the weekend. Now, whether that comes to pass or not, I'm not so sure, but that would be a fascinating clash.
Would be a fascinating clash. Unfortunately, we're not going to get it. Bob Ollinger does not run at Cheltenham on Saturday. My Drogo will run there, and you'd imagine Bob Ollinger will now be kept for Limerick, the Faheen Novices Chase. So that is disappointing that we didn't get to see that now, but it's probably just too good to be true. Let's look at the 3 mile division. We've got Bravemansgame, who's been very impressive. Ahoy Senior, again very impressive. We've not seen Galopin des Champs. Vanillier hasn't set the world alight, and Gaillard de Menil we've also not seen. At this stage, looking at that, knowing what we know with Bravemansgame and Ahoy Senior, Galopin des Champs got a big task on his hands.
Yeah, very much so, and he's going to have to be a good jumper and be just as good as kind of people want him to be, and I suppose he put that together at Punchestown at the end of last year when winning the Grade 1, having won the Martin Pike. But I thought Ahoy Senior, he's as mad as a clown really, but he's a blooming good horse, and what he did at Newbury was pretty destructive. And you know, Mr. Incredible is probably not a Grade 1 horse, but he's not a bad horse at the same stage, and he made him look very ordinary. So probably out of the market at the moment, he'd be the one I'd be siding with.
Interesting, I disagree. I would definitely stick with Bravemansgame over Ahoy Senior, and I firmly believe that the only destination Bravemansgame will be turning up at Cheltenham will be the Festival Novices Chase, unless something was to happen to Bob Ollinger and they might see an opportunity to go that way. If they don't run in the Festival Novices Chase, I think they'll skip Cheltenham and go straight to Aintree, so I would have that in mind when backing him for this race. Galopin des Champs, I suspect, will be out in a beginner's chase over Christmas. The big getaway won a 2 mile 5 furlong, a beginner's chase at Leopardstown. I suspect he'll go for probably a race like that. And Gaillard de Menil has been entered up here and there. They're definitely thinking 3 miles with him as well. So it is interesting. The National Hunt Chase then, the plodders, the boats. Run Wild Fred, you know, epitomises the term boat when we're talking about race horses. Statler in there, Vanillier, 300 through 5, another big boat. You're a big fan of Run Wild Fred, and I must admit he definitely sets the standard, and he was very impressive. I'm a big fan of Gars de Sceaux. I put him up at 50 to 1. He's now 33s, and I still, when he comes out, I know Gordon thinks a heck of a lot of him. They even might think he might be good enough to go down a Festival Novices route, but they did talk about the National Hunt Chase in a stable tour at the start of this season, and he could be one that's slipping under the radar. He's currently 33 to 1. I would definitely have a bit of confidence about when he comes out, and I suspect they might start over 2.5 miles, but he will be seen to best effect over further. Talk to me, who beats Run Wild Fred?
I don't think anyone really if he turns up. I suppose the caveat is Gigginstown don't particularly like the race. Is he going to go and run in the race? I'm not so sure. That's something to bear in mind if you want to take those short odds, but I just think he's a class apart. He's got the right profile for the race. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think Gars de Sceaux is a serious horse. I just couldn't have him for a National Hunt Chase whatsoever this year, because I feel he needs more experience than he's going to end up getting. You know, he's probably only going to be able to run 2 or 3 times before Cheltenham. I just don't think it's enough. You know, you've seen the Boss's Oscar being run plenty of times, 300 through 5, run plenty of times. I don't think that's any coincidence with those horses. I think they want to run them in a National Hunt Chase or potentially even a handicap. 300 through 5, I know you don't like him, which is very odd considering you absolutely love Paul Nicholls' horses, but I think he'd have a chance in this race, to be honest. He's slow, but he jumps pretty well, and he keeps going, and he's run around the track as well, which is also a nice bonus. I think he's still double figures, so he mightn't be the worst each way bet in the world, but I think if Run Wild Fred runs, he will win.
And on the Boss's Oscar, down the line, I think they're going to eye up the Ultima. I'm not 100% sure what his handicap mark is. It's 143, something around that. Anyway, it's in the low 140s. I think the reason why they've been running him plenty of times and the reason why he's probably not been winning is because they want to give themselves options, and something like the Ultima Handicap Chase on the first day would be up his street, especially off a mark maybe in the mid 140s. He'd have to go very close there. Let's then move on to the Open Hurdlers, and the Champion Hurdle is a race that I love. Unfortunately this year it doesn't look very strong. Honeysuckle looks in a league of her own. She was very impressive, did everything right, stayed very well, showed speed, jumped well, and you look at it and you go, is she going to have to beat any more than she beat last year? Sharjah won the Morgiana, but Honeysuckle's put him to bed a couple of times now. Epatante was disappointing, even though she finished in the dead heat, not so sleepy in the fighting 5th. appreciate it. Like you say, if he was to fall maybe at Christmas, could they think about a champion hurdle? I don't think so. Adagio, on the other hand, was very impressive when second in the Greatwood. I was expecting him to run the International, and I think that was the plan until he picked up a slight setback, so he misses that, which is disappointing. And then you're scratching around and you're looking at Tiupu or maybe St. Felician, who we've only seen once. And to think realistically, would St. Felician and Tiupu, as much as they might be great young horses, they're not going to be threatening Honeysuckle. I think it's fair to say she'll probably win it again.
Yeah, unless something goes wrong, I just can't see what happens, or who beats her, especially given that the majority of these are going to have to give her £7. I think Sharjah's got every chance of finishing second or third again. Probably one that I know some people like throwing a bit of fire at him, thinking he might need a trip, and he probably does, but maybe a fastly run champion hurdle. I still think there's a potential that Zanahiyr could run above himself and could potentially run into the frame. I know he's a big price. I would prefer to back Zanahiyr for the champion hurdle than I prefer to back Tiupu. Like, that's where I'm coming at with that angle. And I just think there's a lot of very exposed horses, and at least with those horses there's a hint of unexposed about them, and they might be able to continue to progress.
I almost think that Gordon knows Zanahiyr's not going to be beating Honeysuckle, so he might look after him with something like the Aintree hurdle in mind, which could be perfect trip for him. 3.5 weeks in between the champion and the Aintree hurdle. I'm not sure he'd be wanting to give him a really difficult race, but if opportunities come up and it looks weak, it might be worth taking. The Stayers hurdle is fascinating. There's just not one standout horse, which means that everyone's trying to make a case for a Stayers hurdle candidate. We've got Buzz in there. Will he stay 3 miles? I suppose we'll find out in the long walk hurdle. I think he's probably got too much pace. Classical Dream is an enigma. We don't know how good he is. He's run over 3 miles once at Punchestown, looked very impressive doing so, but he's never done it consistently, and that's what's been difficult. Time Hill was so disappointing in France. Flooring Porter, I think, is a fairly solid punt at 11-1. Ronald Pump run well behind Honeysuckle. Then we're looking at Champ, Sporting John, Thomas Darby, Zanahiyr maybe, and even one to chuck in there, Bear Gills, the 4th in the Ballymore last year. He's going to be coming out in the second half of the season. I think we'll probably see him in something like the Relkeel hurdle, and he could go mightily close in a race like that and maybe have this race in mind. I'm going to say now, I love Champ for this. I think they are going to go hurdling, and I've heard that they've been schooling at home and he's not been jumping very well, hence why he didn't run in the Many Clouds, hence why he didn't run in the Betfair Chase. I think they might try him in the long walk hurdle. He does go better left-handed, so that would be a slight concern. But if you're looking at this, there's no standout, and on actual raw ability, if this was a 3 mile flat race, Champ I'd make 2-1 favourite, and I'd still back him at that price. I think he's that good. He's got such an engine. I'm willing to take a punt on Champ. I'm still very happy with my 20-1 slip there. If he misses the long walk hurdle, could he go for something like the Railkeel maybe, and then onto a Rendlesham at Haydock? Or if he goes in the long walk and he runs well, could he go to something like the Cleve? It's fascinating. At this time, with all of those contenders in the race, what's your thoughts on it?
It's an impossible race in a lot of respects, because as you mentioned, Josh, it just seems to be at this stage that almost any horse that hasn't done something, maybe over fences or is potentially struggling in their usual setup, is now becoming a Stayers hurdle candidate. I saw people saying Envoi should go for the Stayers hurdle after the weekend. I don't know what's going on now, but obviously, sad enough circumstances. I did genuinely think Latest Exhibition was going to make up into being that horse, and that hasn't been able to happen. I just think, I'm seeing an awful lot going into this weekend, because I know Sporting John's running at Cheltenham off top weight in the 3 mile handicap, and he might well win that race. But this horse wouldn't lace the boots at Time Hill at home in Hobbs's yard, I just believe. I think everyone's gotten a bit carried away with that run over in France. It was a bizarre run. The hurdles over in France are a bit bigger than English hurdles as well. He didn't seem to jump them well. It was desperate ground. He's going to run in the long walk hurdle, and I think he'll go very close in it. And if he does go very close in it, 8-1 becomes 4-1 overnight, because I think he's the standard bearer. He was the standard bearer going into the year, having won at Aintree at the back end of last year. And, I know I had unfortunate burnt fingers last season following Time Hill, because he was ruled out around a week before Cheltenham. But I'm going to reinstate my trust with him this year, because I just think people are making this case for Sporting. Johnny's not within a stone of Time Hill.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could trust a horse that ran like that. I'd definitely have to see him win a long walk hurdle to believe.
The problem with Ante-Post punting at the moment, Josh, is that you have to almost preempt it. So you've got, like, I've got to take it on my mind that Time Hill will win the long walk hurdle. And because unfortunately, if you wait, which I understand completely where you're coming from, but if you do wait and he does win it, he's then 3-1, and you can't back a horse at 3-1.
It is a sad state of affairs at the moment, and it is difficult to even prep for videos like this. You're thinking, what am I going to put up at a decent price? It's so difficult. Let's then talk about the mares hurdle. You can go through the list of these, and a lot of them have retired, become brood mares. And a lot of them just won't simply run in the race. But 3 who I think will: Echoes in Rain, Telmesomethinggirl, and She Wears It Well. She Wears It Well was 3 from 3 last season, finished up winning a Grade 3 novice hurdle. She's not been since the 4th of October 2020. I spoke to James Fenton, who is the racing manager of her owners, and she said that she's back in training, she's doing plenty of fast work and seems to have retained her ability, and they're very happy with her. I think she might run over Christmas. She did have a slight setback, but she did look very promising at that time. I'd still wait with her, I'd want to see it. Telmesomethinggirl, she was 5th at Punchestown behind Dysart Diamond on her only start this season, but you probably could put a line through that. The mare's novice hurdle winner last year, she did it very, very well. And I like Glens of Antrim still for the mare's novice hurdle this year, doing a Concertista, going back as a maiden and running well. Which means I'm going to like Telmesomethinggirl in this. And then Echoes in Rain, 3rd in the Morgiana. You'd have to say she was quite disappointing, and they were hoping that she was a champion hurdle horse. I would have doubts whether she'd stayed 2.5 miles at Cheltenham as well.
Yeah, hard race. Doesn't look the most inspiring mare's hurdle market at all time. And I see where you're potentially coming from with Telmesomethinggirl in terms of that race at Fairyhouse. I think there's a couple you could take out of it. Royal Kahala, ran a very good race considering she wouldn't have been too fit, but she ran stink at Cheltenham last year, which would put you off. I actually think there's a horse in that exact same race that I think might be a bet in the mare's hurdle, and I think she's going to run in the international hurdle. Is Heaven Help Us. If you look back at that Fairyhouse run, she made a mother and father mistakes at 2 out, that race-ending mistake, and then she actually ran on again. She won the Coral Cup by half the track. Last year I put up Black Tears for the mare's hurdle, having come 2nd in the Coral Cup the previous year. So it's an angle I quite like. Good Cheltenham Festival form, over course and distance, and I think she'll run a good race in the international on the weekend, and potentially short in price. I think she might be a bet.
Let's then talk about the open chasers, the champion chase. First, Shishkin, who we've not seen yet. He's had a tracheal wash and a blood test, Nicky Henderson has revealed. I did let you know a couple of weeks ago as well. He's had 2, I think. He's been unhappy with both of them, which I had to learn this. It means that 5 days after they're on antibiotics, it means that they have to do extremely light work, which wouldn't be ideal preparation. The fact that he's had to do that twice would not be great. He could even well be behind on his work going into the Desert Orchid. They announced it last week, which means he'd probably be coming back into training now. 2 weeks is a short amount of time to get a horse ripe. The one thing he might get away with is the field. I can't imagine, well, Nube Negra is not going to run. Neither of Willie Mullins' horses are going to run. Maybe he could be going up against a Politolog, but he probably will wait for the Clarence House. It could be a desperate field, and he could have a very easy time. Horses that we have seen, Energumene was very impressive at the weekend. What did you think of him?
Yeah, really good, Josh. Nothing that people wouldn't tell you anyway, but he was excellent. He jumps well. He's a strong traveller. He looks to be a serious horse. Obviously didn't make it to Cheltenham last year. That can sometimes happen. That sometimes can become a little bit of a kind of a trend. So you'd hope it wouldn't, because you want to see this horse at Cheltenham and prove himself. But he looks a seriously good animal.
He does, and Shishkin's going to have to be very good to beat him. Chacun Pour Soi was very disappointing, as well as Nube Negra in the Tingle Creek. What did you make of both of their runs?
Yeah, well, both listless really. Nube Negra almost more so, even though he ended up coming 4th. Chacun just was never going, never jumping. Back to the drawing board with him. I suspect they'll miss Christmas, maybe come back for a Dublin Chase. If he wins that, he'll go over to the champion. If he doesn't win that, is he just waning ability-wise? Age catching up with him? Potentially so. Nube Negra just seems to be a case that he almost needs to go fresh. He's really good fresh, and not very good not fresh. He wasn't fresh at Punchestown last year, ran stink. Was not fresh in the Tingle Creek, ran poorly. But yet, Desert Orchid last year, Champion Chase last year, and obviously the Schlur this year, really good. So if they've put him away now to March, I think that's the plan. you know, he mightn't be without a chance. He does seem to like Cheltenham.
If they could roll back a couple of weeks and make that decision again, I think they may have put him away for the Desert Orchid and then run at the Champion Chase. I think that was the only viable option realistically between the Schlur and the Champion Chase for a fresh horse that needs to go well fresh. I wouldn't fancy him for a Champion Chase whatsoever now. Even though he's going to have that time off, I think the exploits at the start of the season could be a negative towards the spring. Is it about time we start giving more credit to Grenadine?
Probably is. Overall in his career, he's one of these horses that keeps winning Grade 1s, and people keep kind of almost saying, oh, well, it was because of this, it was because of that. He ran okay in the Champion Chase last year. He came 4th. He's entitled to improve for that. He's still a young horse. I think he's where he should be in the market. He's 8-1. I don't think that's a big price. I don't think it's a small price. I think it's completely fair based off what he's done. And I don't know what the plan would be with him. Would they go Clarence House maybe, then Champion Chase, something along those lines? It would be interesting to see, but he's more than entitled to take his place at Cheltenham.
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely the plan, the Clarence House. And then on to the Champion Chase. We probably can't discuss the Champion Chase without talking about Put the Kettle On. I think Henry de Bromhead has conceded that this year might be a level above last year, and he's already mentioning the Mayor's Chase as an opportunity and a direction they could go. If you owned Put the Kettle On, where do you think you would send her?
It's completely ground dependent, Josh, really. I remember talking to actually one of her owners at the McCoy Awards, and he pretty much said it point blank to me, really, on good ground at 2 miles she's just not quick enough, and if it was good ground come March or even decent spring ground, I think she would go up in trip to the Mayor's Chase, and if it was softer, even heavy, which would be ideal, she'll go back to the Champion Chase. You can't completely rule her out because of her Cheltenham record, but I don't know, I didn't fancy her last year. She won, so I don't want to kind of do it again, but at the same stage I just don't see her kind of getting close to Shishkin or Energumene.
Before we go further, Envoi is going to be stepped down in trip next time out. What's your thoughts?
Couldn't back him with stolen money, Josh, and that's a sad state of affairs. I love the horse. I've loved the way he is. Doesn't seem to be right. I think he's hurting somewhere. His jumping's awful. He's now wearing a hood in the pre-parade ring. I don't know when that started to happen. I don't know. I know this may be controversial because the trainer and the jockey is absolutely superb. Henry and Rachel are terrific. If I owned them, to be honest, the last chance saloon I would do is get him back to Cullentra and get Davy back on his back and see whether that can just ignite something.
I would say exactly the same. Genuinely, I think that he might be one of those horses who has unbelievable ability, but Gordon Elliott knows him better than anyone, and he can just get him right on the days, and maybe he goes there, and it's not been straightforward since he made the move, and it's a sad state of affairs because he had so much ability, and you don't want him to turn into a Sam Crow. But he is going that way, and it is disappointing to see. I've put him up in the Ryanair Chase, and Allaho was very impressive in the John Durkan at the weekend. I expect him to come on leaps and bounds for it, but up until a point, I definitely thought Asterion Phalange was going to win. I thought fitness would show, and they would come back to him. It didn't. He toughed it out. Very, very good. Fakir Dudari was behind. Janadil was behind. I struggled to see a case where they beat him at Cheltenham, especially in that same form that he did last year. I don't think any horse in the land would beat him.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. If he runs exactly pound for pound as last year, I think he demolished the field yet again. The only thing that the weekend proved yet again for me, and it's something, I get very few things right, Josh, but one thing I can constantly tell you that I get right is that proper Grade 1 level, and I know he has won a few Grade 1s, but a proper Grade 1 level, Fakir Dudari is just not up to winning. He's a good horse, he's a smashing horse, I'd love to own him, but people constantly tell me he's going to win these Grade 1s, he'll win the John Durkan, he'll win the Ryanair. He doesn't have a chance of winning them.
He's still a very young horse, and he might improve.
No.
I would agree.
It's just not good enough. Like, there's times where you've just got to admit, like, he was really good in the Melling last year, and I understand that was a Grade 1, because before people say, oh, he won it. Like, I get that. He won a Drinmore as well. But, like, those were subpar Grade 1s. When he comes up against a really good horse, you know, like an Allaho, like a Shakam Poursois, these sort of horses, you know, he loses. And I just thought the way the race worked out in the John Durkan, with Allaho running well, but probably not to his best. Like, should Fakir Duderee not have won the race? Potentially, and yet he didn't even come second, he came fourth. And a Tornado Flyer flashing at him at the line.
I'll concede that one, and Fakir Duderee won't be winning the Ryanair Chase in March. I don't even fancy him for the race, I don't know why I'm backing him up. The Cheltenham Gold Cup then is the final big one that we do need to talk about, and Plutard was devastating in the Betfair Chase. Does he set the standard now? He looks a year older, maybe a year better. He does look very, very good.
Yeah, he does set the standard, and he's the rightful favourite at the moment. Personally, out of the two, I'd probably go with Manella Indo, just because I think he's got slightly better Cheltenham form, and geez, he was so good in the race last year. I think the two of them could easily come 1-2 again. And I think, I know I'm probably beating an old drum at this point, but I think when you look at the remainder of the Gold Cup picture, like, is the Boom not going to come third yet again? Like, he's as good as anything else in the race. Like, there's actually not much depth to the Gold Cup market. The front two are actually really good horses. The rest are so-so.
Yeah, I agree. Look, he's going to be banged there. Of course he is. Manella Indo ran very well, I thought, behind Frodon. He would have been 80% fit, and he'll be fine-tuned for the next go. I think it'd be the King George for him, maybe. Chantry House, I thought, looked good on his start, but again, he's not really beaten anything substantial, because in the race at Cheltenham, Envoi fell. He was expected to win. In the race at Aintree, Espoir de Rome fell. He was going to put it up to Chantry House, and then the big breakaway ran no sort of race, and we didn't really get any marker. So he is a difficult horse to work out. I do actually think he's very good. I really do think he's very good. I think he stays 3 miles as well, and I do think he'd go very close into King George. Although Kempton, I don't think is a track that would suit him massively. Protectorat, what did you make of him at Aintree? And is he now a viable Gold Cup contender? I don't think so, but I know a lot of people do.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's a Gold Cup contender, and that's not taken away from his performance on the weekend. He was super. The race cut apart though, Josh. Like, Imperial Aura pulled up, Simply the Bets pulled up. It was driving rain. He was pretty much almost the only horse to finish. Like, I know there was 2 or 3 finishers, but like, it was the definition of a race cutting up, and he seems to be quite good around Aintree. You know, he'd be the type of horse that might have a chance in a Betway Bowl, but wouldn't be for me in the Gold Cup.
I do like Galvin. I think that he's going to come up short in these good Grade 1s over 3 miles in Ireland, but those extra 2 furlongs and that stiff hill, I think, would be right up his street. I do think he's got a very good each-way chance, and I'm going to stick with that. Let's then talk about the current bets, the horses that we've currently got. I'm going to go through my list, and it's probably looking a little bit sweeter than yours, I must say. Galopin de Champ for the Festival Novices Chase, 25-1, now 5s. That looks pretty good. Glens of Antrim, Mares Novice Hurdle, 25-1, now 16s. Dusart, I put him up at 25s, he's now 20s, and it looks like he is going chasing, and might be the best that the British have to offer. Champ in the Stayers Hurdle, 20-1. He's still 20-1. I like that. We've got Fury Road for the National Hunt Chase. That looks a bit of a horrible one. 25-1, still 25-1. Gars de Sceaux, 50-1 for the National Hunt Chase. Now 33s. Envoi in the Ryanair, 16-1, now 10-1. Don't know what I was thinking when I was putting up Benaud for the Triumph Hurdle at 25s. That was way too premature. And then Coqolino, any race at 12-1, now 8-1. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to add 3. Yeah, 3. I know it's been probably a month and a half since our last video. I'm going to add Champion Green for the Boodles at 16-1. He ran 4th behind Iberique de Soy at the weekend, a horse who I had in mind for the race. It was Champion Green's first run over hurdles, and he wasn't beaten a long way, and I think he's probably got more scope to improve than Iberique de Soy. And then the other 2, Telmesomethinggirl at 10-1 for the Mares Hurdle. I think that she is overpriced for that. I think she'll be banged there, and I think she's a slow burner that will get better and better and better through the season. And then I am going to put up Concertista at 4-1 for the Mares Chase. It's extremely short, but I think she could easily be definitely less than 2-1 on the day. Tell me about your current bets, and tell me what you're going to add to them.
Yeah, I'd rather not tell you about my current bets, to be honest, Josh. A couple in there that have unfortunately got no chance. They're just not going to go there. We've had obviously a terrible situation with latest exhibition for the Stairs. Monmiral 50-1 for the Arkle. Paul Nicholls should have sent him chasing based off what we saw in the Fighting Fifth, but that's a non-runner. Gentlemansgame 33-1 for the Festival Novices Chase. He's a lovely horse, but he's only got one entry at Christmas, and it's in the 3 mile Grade 1 hurdle, which would indicate to me he's not going chasing, so that's no use. He's a good horse though, probably not a bad bet for the following season. 3 Stripe Life 33 for the Supreme, still not giving up on that, has a sniff. O'Toole 25-1 for the Ballymore, that will get a lot shorter if he wins first time up. Dysart Dynamo 25-1 for the Ballymore, nice bet if he goes down that route, because I think he's a seriously good horse. A Gars 10-1 for the Cross Country. You know, Tiger Roll didn't do much for his cross-country chances. It's not a race of great depth, it's just more so, will they come over? They didn't come over last year, it left me heartbroken. Brandy Love, 25-1 for the Mare's Novice Hurdle, similar to O'Toole. You know, it seems to be a race that has plenty of horses in with a chance at the moment, but if Brandy Love comes out and wins a maiden hurdle, she'll be half that price, so you know, that's a hard one to gauge. It's going to be a tough race though, and probably up against it there. And then Bardenstown at 50-1. I think, Josh, you could have overall the better book here, but it's going to come to the 3rd race at Cheltenham on Friday, and Sean Bowen's going to be on Bardenstown Lad, and he's going to be pumping the living daylights out of this horse coming down the hill, and he's suddenly going to accelerate out of all proportion and take it up, taking the last, and then out-battle some horse and win by a snug half length, and that'll be the end of it.
I'm not going to put it past him. Who are you going to add to that list?
Yeah, I'm going to add 2 myself. One that I'm very sweet on. Actually, as I said, I put up Blazing Cal for the Bartlett on my own channel. I know Gavin Lynch has put that up, so that price is slightly collapsed. So I'm not going to put it up at a collapsed price, but instead I'm going to back the horse that he beat at Galway, Gringo Dobrell, at 12-1 in he race. He was 14-1 with Sky Bet up until a couple of days ago. He's now 12. I just think he might be a Martin Pipe County Hurdle type horse. He's got plenty of ability. He beat Adamantly Chosen last time out. He's a nice horse. He's got a bit of hurdling experience. I think he could go well in one of those races. It's probably not dissimilar to yours with Coqolino. He's probably my handicap version. And the other one I'm going to take you on in the Mare's Chase. I just think, I said it before with Kilcrut, there was an overreaction with some of these horses, and the reaction to put Ellie May out to 8-1 for the Mare's Chase just seems too big. It wasn't her running. She's better than that. It was a grim day at Aintree. I would forgive any horse that lost at Aintree on Saturday. It just looked bleak and dark, and I just think Ellie May's so much better than that. She's got Cheltenham experience, and she might out-battle Concertista, which would be my main play there. And at 8-1, I think she should be 5 or 6-1.
It's all going to come down to that. Is it the second last race on the Friday? It is, isn't it? Yeah, it's going to come down to that one. Bragging rights. But thank you very much for watching. We do hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for the support on the channel. If you did enjoy it, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you next week.